Cat, and I'm back because what once was will be again. I got my thinking cap on so we can use history to divine the mysteries of the Game of Thrones. And we're going to use a little psychological and spiritual mumbo jumbo to go along with that. So, Season 6, Episode 7, we're going to talk about Arya getting stabbed and what her likely outcome is. I'm fairly certain that we're all in agreement that there's going to be a Jon Snow moment for Arya. And there are a number of reasons why, but let's set up the scene. So she's walking around rather calmly, flouting her money. I'm going to take a passage to Westeros. Blah, blah, blah. Everything's good. Out comes a little old lady who's clearly a disguise and stabs her repeatedly in the gut. We see that it's the waif. And she not only stabs her, but she sticks that knife in. We get a close-up view of her sticking that knife in and twisting it. Just like she's been twisting the knife in Arya this whole time. You're never going to be no one. In fact, that was one of the problems and why Arya had to have a physical catalyst to remind her that she had not become who she was supposed to be. Her persona had not changed yet. So let's go down the line of things that are represented in this scene. Number one is karma. What goes around comes around. Because we remember that Arya was in the brothel pretending to be somebody else. She was supposed to kill somebody else, but she didn't. She ended up doing a revenge killing, and she did stab that man from behind in the gut several times before she ended up putting his eyes out and then eventually delivering the coup de grace, the finishing cut. That didn't happen with the waif. But the waif did do almost exactly how Arya had performed her own assassination. So clearly, she's getting a little taste of what it's like to be on the other end of the knife. Number two, she could not go back to be Arya Stark, and that's what she attempted to do. She went and got her sword. She did not kill the lady in the theater. She went and got her sword. She was like, I am Arya Stark. I am not no one. And she was supposed to be no one. Or she was supposed to be her next character. She could no longer be Arya Stark of Winterfell. Because that Arya Stark is long gone. Even if she attempted to go back, there's no getting it back. She's killed people. She's witnessed some really terrible acts. She's been out in the world learning things. She was made blind. She was learned to fight. She's seen how the Faceless Men's philosophy applies to it's not just the bad that die, but the good as well. There's some spirituality in there. Is God a benevolent God or not? So number three, Jaqen has his own agenda. It's not an agenda that everybody is paying as close attention to, because the story does things like puts things in your face like they're physical representations, and people are always trying to guess what it means. What are these things that are in your face? What's going to happen next based on the things that's in your face? In reality, there's an overarching story. Every character has the destination that they're supposed to get to, that they're trying to reach for, the ones that people are moving them towards. And Jaqen is like an Azor. He's the helper of God. I know. In the West, we think of God as purely a benevolent force, largely in Christianity. He does good things. We pray for him for mercy. We pray for assistance. We believe he might answer our prayers, and sometimes he doesn't. Or in some people's minds, God has a plan, which we hear throughout this story continuously. In fact, that Sanders Clegane was actually told that God must have a plan for you because you didn't die. You should have died. And I thought you were dead. And maybe he was. But he did not die because God has a plan. So we get the idea that there's a plan that's in play. And the story gives you this Iron Throne. It's right in your face. So everybody's looking at this Iron Throne. Everybody assumes that the destination, the overarching destination here, is the Iron Throne. But there is a throne in play, but it is not the Iron Throne. That's just the thing that's in your face to make you look at it while they're doing something else someplace else. And you really get that from HBO's series making. You have to appreciate how many previews they've given you of events that are supposed to be upcoming, but you haven't seen them yet. You keep thinking, oh, the next episode, the next episode. And while you're looking at those things out there, they're doing things like stabbing Arya. That brings us to number 4. Who is Arya supposed to be? She obviously cannot go back to be Arya Stark from Winterfell. That's gone. All along, Jaqen has been trying to turn her into no one. Who are you? They kept asking. Who are you? She kept saying no one, but they knew she didn't believe it, right? But after she was stabbed and she's walking down that street, and people are totally ignoring her. If they look at her, most of them just look and they glance away. At that moment, she has become exactly what they told her or were trying to make her into. She was no one at that moment. She was no one. She was nobody. She had no friends. There was nothing important. She was nobody important. If she laid down and died in the street, people would just walk around her and eventually somebody would, kick her in a ditch or something of that nature. So she has now become no one. But number 5 was that indeed almost everybody was ignoring her. But she did look into the face of 3 women, straight into their faces as she walked down the alley. Now there's probably this idea that they looked at her and saw nobody as well. But actually what it reminded me of was the red priestess in the alley when Tyrion was with Varys. He's sitting there listening to this lady give a sermon, and while he's talking to Varys, she turns and looks right at him like she recognizes him. And in fact, these ladies, their hairdo, their whole demeanor, how they looked at her, reminded me exactly of that moment. That maybe indeed they do recognize her. So getting to our last, what I think is going to happen is a red priestess. Because let's face it, the injuries that Arya has just suffered are death sentences. In the Middle Ages, if you got stabbed in the gut, you were going to die. In particular, if somebody stabbed you and twisted it around so they could screw up your internal organs. There was no surgery. There was no fixing that. You weren't just going to heal. Maybe in the fantastical book, you would get somebody to bandage you up and you'll get better. I highly doubt that. That's why I believe we're going to see a Jon Snow moment. She has just had a devastating injury. She has to die because she has to have a physical catalyst to get her to the next stage. Many of our characters do not move forward the way they're supposed to. Everybody's supposed to move forward. They don't always. So what do they get? They get a catalyst. They get a physical reminder, and it's usually death, so that the next persona comes out. So when Arya awakes, will she be really no one this time? And I believe that's what we're going to see. Now, there's some things in the books that I'm not sure if we're not skipping over, like when she's supposed to be with the theater group, or maybe that's something that happens after she gets stabbed, because this is in the Winds of Winter that hasn't been released yet, and we only have parts. So it might be that she comes out as no one, and then she joins his troop. She's got no money. She needs to be nothing and invisible. But in sort of plain sight, but invisible, so that she can get to her next destination. And that's exactly what Jaqen wants, because the overall, he has an agenda. It's like he knows something that other players don't. It's the same way with some of the red priestesses. Some of them know parts of it, and they're trying to move it in that direction. But it's as if Jaqen has the clue about where people need to go and why they need to get there. And that's the Azor. So is God a benevolent God? No. Does he sometimes make things happen, they're telling you in the story, that are bad things that move people in the direction they need to go? Yes. Arya could not remain Arya Stark. She had to become no one. She didn't do it by herself. She's no one now. Thank you very much. I'll talk to you later.
Joffrey, Cersei, Walder Frey, Meryn Trant, Tywin Lannister.